Did you know that when parents are asked what they would do if they had 1 extra hour every day, most parents say they would use it for sleep? Are you exhausted trying to balance kids, work, and play? Do you want more purpose and less monotony in your life? Do you get overly irritated, frustrated, and angry with your children? If you've answered yes to some of these questions, then I'm glad you're here. I know how busy you are, and I'm not here to take your time. I'm here to help you take it back. Close your windows, open your mind, and let's kick some ass. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kick-Ass Dad, Passionate Parenting in a Volatile World, and I'm blown away by my guest today. I've got David Wood on the line with me, and David is known for developing world-class personal development training programs. He has impacted thousands of people. He's a business leader, author, trainer, humanitarian. He's lived, traveled, and worked in over 50 countries, brings his passion for people and culture and the unknown into everything he does. And I love that about you, David. You really are passionate about getting out of your comfort zone and experiencing the world and pushing into the unknown. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, and congratulations on the show. Really, really needed. I mean, that's a great who you target and how you target it. It's just so needed in the world. So congratulations on what you're doing.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate that. So I'd love to jump right in here. I have had the opportunity of listening to your show quite a bit, and what I love about it is your journey from where you started to where you are now. I think that's so powerful. Can you share a little bit about your journey, where you grew up, and how that kind of influenced where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I left school when I was 15, and I was an army brat. So, you know, we lived in multiple countries as kids, so we really didn't have the kind of the typical home life. But at 15, I was a pretty angry teenager, and my teacher sat me down, Mr. Orsley. He said, "Listen," he says, "you're the worst student I've had in 37 years of teaching, and you're probably going to end up in jail or on the streets." Yeah, and being the enlightened 15-year-old that I was, I told him to yeah, enjoy himself. Hey, I left school. I left home around the same time, you know, and I started dabbling in business. And then something happened that completely transformed my life, because all of my friends at the time were doing drugs. They were drinking all the time. Yeah, I mean, I come from a pub culture, so you know, every night you'd go and hang out with your mates and drink, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 pints of beer. I mean, it was just very much the culture I lived in. But you know, the drugs and everything else it was like I couldn't meet anyone that wasn't getting high or getting drunk. And what happened that changed my life really was I played on a dart team, and they decided, 12 of them decided to go on a 6-day all-inclusive cultural, a drinking holiday for 6 days in Tunisia. I had no idea where Tunisia was. I couldn't tell you where it was. And for those of you who are not sure, it's in North Africa, and it's a Muslim country. And when they left, well, we just got drunk the whole time we were there, typical British tourists. And I don't mean that in a bad way, people from Britain. but anyway, so, you know, I decided I would travel until my money ran out. I had this feeling inside that I didn't want to live my life like this. And I had about $2,000. And that journey, actually, when they got off and the plane took off, I remember turning around and seeing Tunisia for the first time. Because with a group of mates in an all-inclusive resort, it's very, very easy to not see any culture. And then suddenly I'm walking through the streets and I was terrified. I didn't understand the Muslim people. I didn't understand, you know, what was sensitive to them. And here I am. I mean, I'm 52, so I'm at that time I was 20. 32 years ago, you know, when you wore the short shorts and the muscle shirts, and you know, and that was very much against their traditions. And so I received a lot of hostility without knowing why. And I was terrified. So I locked myself in a hotel room for about 7 days. And I kept looking at my passport thinking, you know, one day I'm going to be able to go home and show everyone where I've been. And I was doing it more for everyone else. I'm sure other people on the call can probably relate to that sometimes we often do more for other people to please them than we do for our own lives. And after I spent about half my money in the first week, because it was an expensive hotel to stay in. And I thought, I got to do something. Anyway, I left, and I started a journey that lasted 10 and a half years in 42 countries. And in that time, I lived a lot in the unknown, and I found and fell in love with who I was in many ways. But I found myself a lot. I grew up, and when I arrived in Canada, it was by accident. I had no plan to come to Canada, and I slept on a roof the first night because I had a deal with myself. Whenever I went to a new country, I wasn't allowed to spend a nickel until I had a job and I had somewhere to live. And those two things would consume my first day and sometimes my first 2 or 3 days, but I wasn't allowed to spend any money. So it made me very, very good at connecting with people very quickly and deciding what I wanted to do. So each country, each location, each city held in store for me some new adventures, right? And that journey, I sort of stumbled across a book called Think and Grow Rich. And I remember reading it, and I remember the next day deciding to make shifts in my life. And that went on, and I've grown multiple multi-million-dollar companies, and I've been very, very fortunate. I lead a very, very blessed life, and I found I believe I found my true calling. Les Brown says this. He says the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you discover why. And that happened to me a few years ago. So.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that story. Maybe this is why I kind of resonate with you so much, but I had a very similar experience where, I was kind of a troubled kid, and I did a lot of unhealthy things, and I focused on a lot of unhealthy things with my friends, and that's all there was in my life. And so I kind of decided to drop out of society, as it were, and I went and hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I just got away from everything, and I visited yoga ashrams, and I did the meditation and the vegetarian thing, and then I bust across the country and found this like avatar personal development program. So I became this kind of personal development junkie, but I still, like, there was something missing, and it wasn't really until I looked in the mirror and knew that I had to change. Like, wherever I go, that I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be that whatever it is that I was. But it wasn't until I really looked in the mirror and said, Mike, it's you who needs to change, not the world. Is that kind of what your experience was?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize at the time that I was seeing the world as I was. And every single person, if you're having, if you sort of, seeing a dark world, if you think people are negative, if you think there's not many opportunities, once we go back inside and we realize that all we do is we see the world as we are, not as it is, and we will attract exactly who we're being. And so with that kind of mindset, when you understand that, so if things aren't going well, if we take 100% responsibility for everything in our lives and everything not in our lives, then there's no one left to blame. And when we start to see the beauty within us, we start to notice it in other people. And when we notice the beauty in other people, we talk to that beauty. And then people feel lit up when we're around. And when we're lit up, we become attractive. We become more magnetic. And with that magnetism comes success, comes money, comes friendship, comes love. Whatever you want starts with self-love, right?
Absolutely. I encourage my listeners, and this is kind of cheesy, but I encourage them to look in the mirror.
Cheese is all right.
Yeah, I say, look in the mirror and say, I love you. Because, and as parents, we oftentimes put it, we focus on the kid first. And until we put that oxygen mask on ourselves and create that self-love and that self-confidence and that ability to be better people, then we can model those behaviors for the kids. And I think that seems to be the essence of what you're saying there.
Well, I think the challenge with being a parent, I mean, I have two boys, 15 and 13, and the reason I got into personal growth was my son was 2 or 3 years of age, and I heard the poison from my parents coming out of my own mouth of my own son. And, I thought, holy crap, I don't want to be that dad, right? And so the actual reason I started and my marriage was on the rocks, so, I mean, I had a lot of stuff going on, and this wasn't that long ago. I mean, my youngest is 13, so I started doing personal development about 13 years ago. As a parent, it's challenging because the wounds of the father are typically passed on to and become the wounds of the son. And so, however, and we come from an era, like I'm 52, so definitely the era I grew up in was children should be seen and not heard. They had no rights. Do as you're told, that was it. And so, and corporal punishment was very much a part of the day. You beat your kids all the time. And I know some people still beat their kids, but it's this whole idea of the evolution of parenting and understanding that those wounds can be healed. And for some people, it goes from generation to generation to generation, and someone has to be the one responsible to say, hey, it's going to stop right here, and I'm just going to start focusing back on me. So I believe that for me to become the best parent, And I don't consider myself to be an incredible parent. Some people call me that, but I know my own challenges, my own demons I fight with that. But I think for me to have that, the best thing to do is for me to focus on me. And then as I find my own light, it's much easier for my children for me to see that in my own kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. One of the things that you inspired me, because you were probably one of the direct inspirations for me to actually do a podcast, because I had all these ideas, and I felt like I was a really good parent, and working on myself, and I'm I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt like I had something to offer. And one of the things you said really inspired me. Can you tell, maybe share it with our guests? Maybe I don't want to do it, but you talk about a dance floor and being willing to get up and dance.
Well, you mean going first?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
In relation to kids, just remind me of the story because I told a lot of stories around that. Are you talking about?
Well, you inspired me to get up, and not in necessarily in relationship to kids, but in life, and stepping up and not being afraid to be the first to go.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. So this is one of my big philosophies is everyone's waiting for somebody else to go first, to hug first, to smile first, to invite first. Like a lot of people, I bet, listening on this podcast right now on this show. It's a show. It's not a podcast. It's a show. It's beyond the podcast. This is a show. But a lot of you don't know your neighbors and haven't gone around and met them or invited them into your world. So a North American way of living is very, very isolated and very alone. And so Facebook has become the new connecting point, and people have 1,000 friends on Facebook and feel lonely at night when they go to bed, right? So I think that, having the courage to go first, and I mean, I'm a hugger. So if you're going to meet me, anyone, anytime, I don't care if you're a suit, I don't care if you're a judge, I don't care if you're a pauper, all right? I'm going to give you a hug because that's how I greet people. And what I find is, so those people who have never been hugged find it very, very hard and confronting the first and second time. But I find within 3 or 4 times that they start to really warm to it, and they'll be the initiator of the hugs. And that's a real good example of, like, I kiss all my men friends. When I hug them, I give them a kiss on the cheek. A couple, I give a kiss on the lips. I mean, we're just goofy. But I mean, but that sounds weird if you're listening. But if you're in the relationship I am with my men friends and my closest friends, that's how I show my affection. And people who watch this, people dig it. They really do, because it's not like, I mean, we're all happily married here. But my affection for my male friends and that intimacy that I can share with them, and it's not a lingering kiss, by the way. This is it's not a staring in the eyes kiss. It's just more like, especially with my business partner, every time we meet each other, we always give each other, and we laugh every time we do it because it's so ridiculous that two successful business guys kiss each other on the lips when they say hi. But I don't give a crap what people think, and I'm not out for people's approval. I don't need someone to tell me how to behave. I know this though: if I grew up in Russia, I'd kiss all men on the lips, or I'd kiss every man on the cheek, because that would be culturally what I would do. And that's what I understand. Each culture has its own strain or its own interpretation of what's normal. What I say is, hey, what's normal for me is if I decide to go first, if I want to go and meet all my neighbors and throw a party and invite them all in, a lot of them will come in jadedly in the beginning. They're going to tiptoe in, or some will decide not to because they're not used to it. And if I continue going first, in the end, my house is going to be full of the people around me. We're going to get to know the neighborhood. The kids are going to have much more of a connection to everyone in the whole neighborhood suddenly. And there's that old adage, right? It takes a village to raise a child, right? So...
Yeah, I love how you bring that up, because we're in this technological society where we're all plugged in, and we've got this massive global connection going on now where we can connect with people in China and France. And, I know,
Well,
you're
us. I mean, you're as far south as in America, and I'm up north here. I mean, it's crazy, right? We're having a conversation.
It's unbelievable. It really is. And so, but I noticed the same thing. I noticed how people were not having those human connections, and we were kind of losing that to our technology. And so my wife and I recently, we went out, and we live in a gated community, and it's got a nice pool and it's got tennis courts, and we said, why don't we have a community garden? Most gated communities don't. So we went out and we got on the board of directors, and we convinced them to do a community garden. So we 2 days ago, we just broke ground on it, and we've got all these people coming out of their houses, getting out from behind the television set, and they're all like digging in the dirt together, and we're chatting, and it's like so far removed from this like nameless, faceless, just rants online where you can just hit enter and not care, who sees what.
Or even worse is the likes. You're on Facebook when someone pushes the like button. I'm not even sure what that means anymore. It's like, what is that? I'm too busy to say anything about what you're talking about, and so, but I think I should probably like it. So because I've got about another 9,000 people I need to go and like. In fact, I don't even have time to read what you just wrote. I just know I like you, so I'm going to push like. That's what it's becoming, right? And I actually teach a program. I just got back from Kansas yesterday, and I taught a 3-day program. And the premise of the program, the deep part of it, is the art of connection. Is teaching people how to get back into conversation. I mean, the oldest person was about 72, and the youngest was 20 or 22, I think. And to watch people learning how to talk to each other again and ask rich, beautiful questions and really sit in connection with someone. And it's almost like the muscles disappeared. And I've done this. I do this program a lot. And, you know, it's crazy to think we're in 2014, is it? 2013, I don't even know what you were in.
You're moving ahead. I like it.
2013. And we're having to learn how to talk again, having to learn how to connect and really, how do you ask questions? I mean, it's crazy that I actually have handouts to teach people how to get into richer and deeper relationships with specific questions. And when they do, and when they practice that over 2 or 3 days, they come and say, holy crap, I feel like I made all these new friends, but I feel like I found myself in those questions. As you start really connecting with people, that's the way to discover yourself, is in relationship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think parents can do the same thing with their kids instead of, and Jay Forty and I, we have a segment on the show where we talk about coaching versus parenting. And parenting is the telling, the taking your kid from one place to another. And that's important when they're, up to like 5 and 6 years old. But eventually they get to a point where they have their own mind, they have their own brain, and they're going to start to rebel. And instead of telling them how to act, it's important to coach out of them. Ask great questions to your kids. Talk to them in ways where they feel like they have a voice, because nothing's ever going to be true for somebody unless they think it themselves, right? You can't install a belief in somebody. They have to bring it forward. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there. Is that kind of, am I vibing with you?
Yeah, you are. You're vibing with me, man. You're catching my drift. You're riding my wave.
Awesome.
And again, but that's a hard thing. Again, as a parent, I find that the 2 hardest relationships in my life, because I consider I'm an expert in connection, and I'm absolutely an expert at going first. I mean, when I walk into places, something's going to happen. It's going to happen. I because I'm not willing to not let it happen. We were in Australia. It's so funny. The same program I'm talking about, the one I just taught this weekend. I was in Australia, and every October I spend a month in Australia, and I normally teach 3 programs there. And I have a really beautiful, beautiful group of people over there that, and they're always new, of course, but the old ones, they bring new people in. So every year I meet a whole new group of Aussies, so I taught this program over, I think this was the 2nd evening, and we all went out for beers, and we're sitting there in this big circle. There's, probably about 25 of us, and one of the guys says, so you're telling me you could walk over there, see those big guys standing over there, and these guys look like they just come out of the mines. They got like muscles on muscles, and they kind of got shaved heads, and they're looking very sinister. He says, you're telling me you could go over there and talk to those guys, and it would be all right? I said, yeah, of course. He says, okay. And before he said really anything else, I got up and I walked over to these guys that were standing there and got into a conversation. And on my children's life, within 5 to 6 minutes, these guys were on the dance floor with me, right? Because I had all these, I was with a group of women as well. I say, hey, come on, guys. And I went and got the girls up, I got the guys up, and then I walked around the whole bar, and I got everyone out of their seats onto the dance floor. Not the first song, but by that 3rd or 4th song, the place was rocking. But someone had to go first. Somebody had to say, come on, it's all right. Once the permission was there, everyone had a blast, right? And if we saw anybody in the pub sitting down, we'd send one of the girls in to get them, or a guy in to get them. It's like, come on, get up here. And then we just keep them going, and people had a blast the whole night long, right?
That's awesome, and that certainly speaks to your going first and stepping into the uncomfortable as well as the unknown. It's such amazing things begin to happen when you do step into what's uncomfortable to you. Then it becomes more comfortable. It almost reminds me of when you're stepping into the unknown. Do you see the Indiana Jones movie where he's like he has to take the leap of faith onto the bridge?
Oh, yeah, the rock. Yeah.
Right, and it's like and it just materializes in front of you. And that analogy it's really moving for me. I love how you just because I've experienced it, and when I do that, my life just the richness of my relationships, the richness of my environments, the richness of the people who I then attract to myself becomes so much bigger.
Well, even with your garden project, I mean, what I love about that is that, right now you're just cutting ground. There's going to be times where, other people are going to be weeding and feeding the food and whatever, and then you're going to be harvesting. And I can see a time when you all come out and have a big dinner together and share the harvest, right? I mean, and that sounds a little woo-woo. Well, unless maybe you live in Italy where it happens every single night where people break bread and that's what I'm saying. Culturally, in North America, we kind of lost it a little bit. We really have. We've lost it. And Canada is not. I think we're more open in many ways. I've lived in the States a lot and I work in the States a lot, but I think there's a lot of fear there. And I think that it was really interesting because coming through the airport yesterday, there'd been that shooting yesterday with, right?
Yeah.
And so 13 people. But the CNN I mean, we were in the airport for 4.5 hours waiting for this flight. And this thing didn't stop the whole time, the whole time, the whole time. And I'm thinking, how do you go to bed at night if you've listened to 4.5 hours, and it would have gone on the whole day as well, of this fear? I mean, I understand it happened. I understand it's bad, and I understand there's things. But it just seems that, when we're peppered with so much negativity, it's very, very hard to know how do we find our way to a positive and a beautiful life if we're allowing such negative thoughts in our head the whole time? And when we understand how the brain works, and it's very specific how it works, and all the new science on how the brain works has been in the last 12 years, we have to manage the doorkeeper of our mind. We have to understand that everything we let in there is going to have an effect. And that when we constantly, we get up, we drink our coffee, we read the newspaper, we watch the news, what we set ourselves up for, and then we go to bed watching the news. I can't tell you. I mean, again, I wouldn't have a television in the bedroom, but people who do, to sit and watch the news before you go to bed, and it's not a positive experience. So I think that we could start doing things, and I certainly on my show we talk about sort of daily things we can do to create just a more aware life, a funner life, more connection to more people, and really success. I mean, overall success, but it's got to start with the way we think, and what we let in, right?
Absolutely. We're constantly programming and conditioning our brain, and I think you're talking about the reticular activating system as well. And we did a whole show on that, and that's something that I've heard you talk about as well. And it's it's the reality. If we put in negative, you get out negative. And we assume because we watched 4 hours of negativity on the television of the same thing over and over and regurgitated, that's the ratio of positivity to negativity in the world. And that's just not the case. You could have 10 minutes spent on, it's important that we share the news, but on the other hand, what about the 90 other things that have gone amazing in people's lives that they're doing, and they're creating value, and they're doing things that make life better for their people? We're being pushed and fed this, this mindset, and that's just not the way the world is.
Well, the thing is, because it's something that we're not aware of, unless you do some work, unless you start, and by listening to your show, people are already starting to understand that there is maybe a new way to think. And I mean, if I look at the reviews from the people who went to this program on the weekend, and I mean, some of them are 50 and 60 and 70 years of age, noticing something or being aware of something for the first time, that there's two of them. There's the person they were born to be with all that hope and possibility, I mean, look at a baby. You can't imagine a baby looking in the mirror. They look completely unconditional, looking in the mirror and saying, gee, I'm ugly. However, adults do it all the time. Adults spend so much of the time in a negative conversation, that little, I call it the imposter, that little voice in the head that's constantly in conversation with us, right? That's constantly eroding at our own self-confidence. So there's the person we were born to be and the person that we've learned to be to survive in the world we grew up in. So, as from parents, if, like you talked about, if the kid is constantly being told what to think, and it starts to have to rebel, so for that child to survive in the world, in that hostile environment, in a home, he has to create a kind of a new personality in order to survive in that world. The person he was born to be, which was to live and to find and live his purpose, that somehow gets lost and buried under all the masks and all the other things we have to do on the journey. And I think it's just fascinating that we do have this potential with awareness to shift that.
Thank you.
Dun, 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 dun. Everybody stand up. Hold hands. No, I'm just kidding.
I love it. It's funny because you always talk about being too woo-woo or whatever, but I think that the world's ready, man.